Welcome to the Small Church Podcast, the podcast for church leaders who want to make a difference in their communities. We're your hosts, Tony Marr and Bruce Montgomery, and we're excited to be with you today. On this podcast, we'll be discussing the latest trends, strategies, and ideas for effective leadership in small-sized churches. So whether you're a pastor, a ministry leader, or a volunteer, this podcast is for you. Each week, we'll bring you interviews with experienced church leaders who have valuable insights to share. We'll also explore topics like team building, community outreach, spiritual growth, and much more. So if you're looking for practical advice and inspiration to help you lead your church with excellence, you've come to the right place. The Small Church Podcast is brought to you by Higher Ministries. Higher Ministries is an organization that exists to help Christian leaders in the churches they serve through coaching and consulting, all for little or no cost. For more information on Higher Ministries or to find out more about the Small Church Podcast, please visit higherministries.com. Thanks for tuning into this week's edition of the Small Church Podcast. Welcome back to the Small Church Podcast. So we're excited to have you with us, choosing to spend some of your time today, whether on your drive or mowing your lawn or simply just sitting around in your home or your office. We're honored that you've taken time to listen with us today. This week's a little bit different as we are picking up in part 2 of our conversation with Pastor Robert Bess. Last week, we were in the middle of our conversation on cultivating change to reach new people. And it was going so great, so well. Robert had so much great insight and knowledge to share that it took way more than the allotted time that we have. So without further ado, we're going to go right back to Robert Bess and the second part of our interview with him. So Robert, I hear you talking about the things that can happen when you're implementing change, and that you experience this, and I think anyone that's ever experienced leading through change, that you're going to encounter resistance. That maybe at the beginning, maybe not until they actually see the implications of the change and how the change has impacted them and their desires and their likes. What are some ways that you can prepare yourself for the resistance that's going to come with the change that's being made?
Well, I think one of the things is to be aware that change is painful. And I try to have mercy and grace for people who really fight change, because all change is painful. We are, as human beings, we are creatures of habit and routine. And in fact, if you're part of a church, one of the things that you've probably noticed is when you come into church, you look for the same seat. People sit in like assigned seats, whatever their seat was last week, they want to sit in the same seat. And it's funny to watch because we are such creatures of habit that even in our church experience, we will do that. And if somebody sits in some long established seat, well, there could be some real discomfort there for people because we always want to do, we have these habits and these routines. We naturally fight change to our routine because our routine makes us comfortable. Our routines give us the illusion that we have some kind of control. But here's the thing about routine. It is the enemy of relationships. You don't want routine in your relationships. And in our relationship with God and our relationship with other people, routines are not good. I mean, if you're married, just ask any married person, can you just do the same things all the time, the same way, and expect the relationship to grow? And the answer is no. Things do have to change, but change makes us uncomfortable. The church that, we were at 250 and we were running multiple services. Now it is sadly back down to one service in the church, and the cafe has just been used now as a fellowship hall again because they wanted their little routine back. They wanted to go back to what they had for such a long time. And so I think it's important to understand going into anything that change is difficult for people. It's really, really hard for people. And I heard it said in one of my psychology classes that change will only occur when the pain of staying the same exceeds the pain of change. And that's true in people. It's in human nature. We will continue to do things exactly the same way, expecting the same results. But as we discussed in our conversation here, the things that we've always done have not been working for a long time. And so change is necessary.
So how do we prepare our congregation and our leadership for the change that's going to happen so that we don't find ourselves in that place where we make great change, we're reaching new people, and then because some people don't like the change that we revert back to the way we were before. You said earlier in our conversation, you brought up the Israelites and leaving Egypt to head to the promised land. I think it's interesting that they're complaining about the life that they've had. You know, they've lived for generations under oppression, under slavery. They've had no freedom. They've had no rights. And now they're being led out to this promised land. And it's been maybe 2 or 3 days and I love that Exodus 14, I think it is, says that they marched with a boldness out of Egypt, that they're excited, they've got a pep in their step, they're can't wait. They finally escaped the oppression and now they have something of their own. That change is happening and it's good and it's great. But then 2 to 3 days into their journey, it says they're wandering around. They've got the Red Sea in front of them. They've got the wilderness all around. And it says they're wandering around, not knowing where to go. And then Pharaoh changes his mind. They see, and he starts coming to get back his workforce, his million people workforce. And they see the cloud of smoke that is coming towards them. And they forget everything that God has just delivered them from. And they start to scream at Moses and say, we had it better back then. The way that it was back then is better than this. And how quickly their tune changed from we're excited about this change. We're excited about the way that it is. And even though we were dying before, even though then it seems like a lot of times the good old days, we only tend to remember the good and not the fact that they were old and they were dying. And you know what I'm saying?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. And like I said, this is just part of human nature that we always want what was, even though it was uncomfortable for them, it was predictable. Their lives were predictable. And so that's just a great example of, at least back there, they're kind of lamenting, at least back there, we knew what to expect. And I think people are, as I said, they're afraid of change. Change is uncomfortable. I think one of the important things is, though, in the changes, as you begin to succeed in some ways, it's kind of remarkable because just like with the Israelites, there is an excitement that builds and it becomes infectious. It is, in sport teams, they call it momentum. And you begin to get some momentum and it changes. If you've seen it in sports or you can see it in business, you can see it in churches too, though, where you begin to build this momentum and the excitement builds. And that momentum can then help you achieve some great things and reach a lot of people. One of the best things I think that we had going for us at that church in Tennessee is that when people would come into the cafe, they were invited by friends to come and have a cup of coffee, which everybody is comfortable with. And when they would come into the cafe, the very first thing they would say is, wow, I wasn't expecting this. And that was exactly the reaction I was looking for, because I wanted to disarm people from their apprehension. It's kind of like if you've ever gone to a restaurant and you had a bad meal, and then a couple of weeks later somebody says, hey, let's go to this place, and you're like, oh, I don't know, I didn't have a good experience there, and let's go someplace else. And that's kind of how churches become, where people, they're expecting their bad experience. So they had a bad church experience, so they never want to go to church again because they think in their minds it will be exactly like that. And if we're going to reach people, then we're going to have to do things to disarm them from the past bad church experience that they've had. And it's something that needs to be in your thinking processes, is how are people going to react when they walk through that door? What is going to be different that sets us apart from the bad church experience that they've had? And it needs to be discussed. You have to have these ongoing discussions all the time. This is why we're doing this. We're not changing just for change's sake, but we're changing because we're trying to reach people, for example, who have had bad church experiences. What can you do to reach people that have had bad church experiences? And so you begin to kind of isolate it and identify it, and then look for ways to like I say, bring that apprehension down and disarm them so that they're going, oh, this isn't what I expected. You know, one of the things, people are reticent to go to church with their relatives because they've done it and they didn't like it. And so we have to do something to mitigate that whole bad experience.
Robert, one of the things I want to talk about for a minute with you is we've spent a lot of time talking about some of the incredible things that you did in Tennessee, but you've had ministries in Ohio, in North Carolina. You haven't been in Tennessee for several years. And we've got a lot of people that could be listening to this show right now that are hearing your story and they're saying, "Oh, that was great for you. My church doesn't have an old fellowship hall that we can renovate and create a new venue. My church doesn't have any resources at all to do anything like that." In one of the churches that you served, I was amazed at one of the ideas that you shared with me years ago, that the church didn't have the ability to create a new worship venue, a new service, but you looked around and you saw that they had some land, and you
Yeah.
came up with an idea to do something that would reach a group of people that weren't coming to the church, that would provide an opportunity for the community, and something that your church would have a heart for, and the ability to pull off. Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, it's something that when my kids were little, when they were growing up, one of the things that we loved to do in fall was, and you can find this in places all over the country, they love to go and visit a corn maze. It's basically a cornfield, and they cut a maze through it, and it's fun. Your kids go in there and they get lost, and they have a lot of fun. And you make your way through the maze, and it's just an incredible family experience. But the thing about it is, it's kind of expensive, and it's gotten even more expensive. I think it's probably between $13 and $15 per person now to go through a corn maze almost anywhere. And so we didn't have any way to be really innovative with our church building. It was what it was, and we weren't going to build another structure. But we did have 5 acres of land that the church sat on, and it's in a very rural part of the community. And so there were these fields all around us, and they plant different things different years. They plant soybeans, they plant wheat, they plant corn. And as I saw the man planting his corn, and I watched the crop come up, I thought, well, what a great opportunity. Maybe he will plant some corn on our property. And I mean, he's got all the equipment and everything, and we'll pay him for the seed or whatever. And then we can actually create a corn maze for our community that will be free. We will invite them to come, and we will be a blessing, even to people that we don't know, people that have never been here. We will find a way to bless them. And I just thought it was such a great idea. And I pitched the idea, and it's out of the box. And at first they were like, well, no, why would a church want to have a corn maze? And I said, because, you know, if you got a family of 5 and you're on a limited income, maybe you can't have this kind of fun with your family, but we can provide a space for them to do that, and it won't cost us very much. And so they ended up saying, yeah, which I was surprised by. And I had talked with this farmer, and I told him what I wanted to do. And I said, if you'll plant this corn here, you can harvest it, but we're going to cut a maze through it. And it was a Christian guy, and he said, I think that's a wonderful idea. And so he planted the corn, and not even knowing how, though, I had to do a lot of research, and I had to have a couple of people who were really good with zero-turn mowers and willing to invest the time to cultivate this corn and use it as a corn maze. And it was remarkable. We advertised it. We ended up getting on the local news because they heard about it, and they wanted to do an interview of this church doing something so totally different. We created a corn maze just for people to come and enjoy themselves with. And we had a big bonfire out by the exit. If you made it through, you got a s'more. I mean, it was fun. We had hundreds and hundreds of people come and visit our corn maze. And the whole idea was not that we would use this for any fundraising, or in fact, somebody said, well, will we take donations? And I said, absolutely not. This is a gift. And a gift is a gift. It doesn't cost them anything. And it was just a way of showing the community that we cared about them, regardless of who they were or what their lifestyle was, that we wanted to create a space for them to come and have some fun. And I think it was tremendously successful. It ended up actually meeting a lot of people, and a lot of people actually ended up, who weren't part of church, ended up becoming part of our church because we were so out of the box thinking.
New ways to reach new people.
Absolutely, yeah. You got to. I mean, one of the things that you notice about Jesus is when he met with people, they liked him right away because he was interested in people. And if churches are going to actually have an impact, you're going to have to demonstrate to your community that you're interested in people, even people that are different than you, even people that maybe you won't see a change in their life, but maybe you had an impact, because what these people found was that they found a church that cared about them and wanted nothing from them other than to just love them. And many of those people ended up calling at different times throughout the year saying, hey, I've got this situation. Is it possible that you could counsel me and my wife? We're going through a hard time. And the reason they reached out to me was because they knew that we cared. And so it's an introduction to your community. It lets them know that you care about them, that you don't want anything from them. You want something for them. And so you have to look for things like that.
That's a huge paradigm shift for so many churches and leaders, that we want to do something. If we're going to invest our time and our resources into something, we want to see the immediate impact in butts in the pews and checks in the plate on Sunday morning. And so this idea of we're going to do something to reach new people that might not immediately pay dividends, it may not ever in a way that we will tangibly see, but yet we know that it's impacting that family in a way that we can't quantify or qualify.
Right. And you see this in the New Testament too, where Paul says, we don't always see everything. And, Paul said, I plant, the seeds, and Apollos comes and waters, and different people contribute along the way. But in eternity, it can make a real difference. But it's not always going to be just.
So how do you foster that culture in your church to where people can see this doesn't have to immediately equate to numerical growth in our Sunday morning attendance?
I think it happens through the conversations and through teaching. And here's the thing about the American Christian. The average American Christian knows way more about Scripture, way more about God and discipleship than they actually apply to their lives. And so it's not like we need more information. We don't need more theological teaching, so to speak, which a lot of pastors like, and it makes you feel like, you're really sharing important information, and you are. But what we really need to be is more about our Father's business. And what we've ended up doing is teaching discipleship to disciples rather than actually implementing some ways that we can actually put into practice for our lives. So it is in those conversations, and it is in your teaching. You always have to kind of reinforce the idea that we are here for a purpose, and that purpose is to worship God and to reach others. And it can't just be, the church investing in people for their own personal growth and gratification. It has to be the church exists here to actually minister to people, to be, to do the things that Jesus was doing. He loved people. And if you're going to have influence on somebody, with somebody, then you're going to have to buy that influence. And that means you're going to have to invest some time. And it's not just time quoting Scripture to people. It's time showing the love of God. The things that you do as a Christian speak much louder than the words you say as a Christian.
Yes. One of the things you said earlier that I want to circle back around to is you talked about how a lot of times you would have an idea, and through presenting that idea to the people of your church, that it became their idea. And one of the things that you almost wanted them to see your idea as their idea. But a lot of times the people in our church have really great ideas, and they're just either afraid to share those ideas, or they don't even know maybe that they have an idea that would be great for reaching new people. So how important do you think it is that we encourage and empower the people in our churches to contribute their ideas and for them to actively participate in these change initiatives?
I think a big part of it is you have to be secure in who you are. And when I was trying to get buy-in, and that's really what we're talking about, there's a lot of a lot of research, a lot of books you can read about buy-in. But when you're doing things as a group, as a collective, like a church, you're gonna have to have buy-in. You can't just say, when I was in the military, it was different, totally different. I was in charge. This is my command. We're gonna go this way, and everybody had to go that way. You couldn't really, we're there to preserve democracy, not practice it. So what you think might not matter at all to me. But in an organization like the church, especially when you're dealing with volunteers, you're gonna have to have that buy-in. And if your priority is I want the credit, then you're kind of in the wrong business. It didn't matter to me at all. In fact, I thought it was a little bit funny that people who were opposed to some of my ideas, after they achieved some success, those people, I would see them, they would bring in their friends and their family, and they'd say, yes, look at what we're doing here to reach people. This is what we've decided to do. All of a sudden, they were part of it. And part of me would go, well, they were against it the whole time until it started working. But if you want credit, then you're in the wrong business. I find the victory to me is actually getting people to think that it's their idea. That when I hear them repeating the little phrases and the little things that I'm saying, the important aspects of who we're going to be as a church and what we're going to do, what we value as a group of people seeking to serve Christ. When I begin to hear people like saying the same things and repeating the same lines, to me, that is, I know we're on the verge of something great, because I invested the time to get them to understand it so much to the point where they've internalized it, and now it is theirs. Now it's their vision, and that's fine. That's great, because a collective vision is really what you're striving for. I don't want to convince people that I'm right. I want us all to be right together.
So then how important is it to celebrate together the successes, the milestones along the road, along the journey?
I think it's really, really critical that you do. And even the small victories, even things that have made a difference in somebody else's life, that's worth celebrating, because like you said a while ago, and you were talking about how at times, it can be very, very challenging and very, very difficult. But when you begin to see real life change in people, that they are moving in a different direction because of the influence and the guidance and the love and support that you provided them, there's just nothing more. There's nothing more satisfying in life than that. That you actually help change somebody's destiny or their life for the better. That is worth celebrating, and it's important that we take the time to do that, because, like you said, when we're talking about the Israelites and they begin to look back and they're thinking, oh, well, we had it so much. At least there we knew what to expect. That idea that we can, and we forget all of the bad things. And that's why nostalgia is such a powerful emotion. And most people are, especially older Christians, they're nostalgic for what they had. I still get some older Christians that will say, well, we need to go and knock on doors. Well, this is not a world where you knock on people's doors anymore. Or let's have one church I was at, they wanted to have a revival out in the middle of the field. They wanted to set a tent up in a field so that we could go have a revival outside in the field like they used to when they were kids. And while it might be nostalgic for them, why would we leave an air-conditioned building with running water to go set out in the middle of the field? It wasn't nostalgic for me, you see, but nostalgia is a very powerful emotion.
Sure.
And so people are nostalgic for things that they've experienced, and they forget the bad and they just remember the good. And so it's important that you have those good things to remember and remind yourself of. And so celebrating those things is a big part of that.
So, Robert, with the little bit of time that we have left, we're gonna get personal for a minute. And I didn't intend on going here, but you brought it up, so it's all your fault. So,
Okay.
you were at a church that you took the position at the church, and you said that your first Sunday there, 16, 17 people, you led through some great change that saw this church grow from 16, 17 people to several hundred people, become the largest or maybe second largest church in your little community that you were in over the course of time, reaching new people, leading new people to Christ on a regular basis, seeing real life change happen, being the kind of church that I think so many of our listeners dream about. But then it went wrong. Then there was conflict within the leadership. They didn't like the change that they saw because it didn't look like the church that they grew up in. You ended up leaving that church to go to another church, um, because of the conflict that was happening there, and the I guess differing of opinions and directions on what should go. All of the change that was implemented was reverted. To go back to our Exodus 14 analogy, the Israelites went back to Egypt, and now the church is a third of where it was when you left. In your leadership position that you're in right now, in the congregation that you're serving at right now, what what lessons do you take from your past experiences in leading through change? What could you have done differently to maybe prepare your leadership then for what was happening? And what lessons would you take from past situations to help you in your leadership in your church that you're at now?
Well, I think one of the things that I've learned along the way, because I've encountered this type of scenario where you come into a church that's desperate, and desperate people will pretty much agree to change. Like I said, when the pain of staying the same exceeds the pain of change, you'll go ahead and change. And so a lot of the churches that I've ministered in, they were in desperate need of change or death. And so um, I think one of the things to understand is that especially a long established church, a church that has been around for 75 or 100 years, um, it's going to take many more conversations and heart to heart, and you're going to actually have to get buy-in um, on a much deeper level. And even then, I think even then, it's still going to be hard. Um, Now, that doesn't mean that I don't keep doing it. I mean, here's the thing. I remember somebody told me once, if you want everybody to like you, you know, get an ice cream truck and start selling ice cream. If that's important to you, don't be a pastor, because not everybody's going to like you. And I think one of the things that it takes to be entrepreneurial in your church approach is the understanding that it's not just about you. It's not about your ego. I never sought to become famous or get any accolades from what I've done. I reveled in the fact that I believe that the kingdom of God was growing, and that has to be your focus. And even so, though, if it's a long established church, even though at first when they say yes, we're willing to do anything, they will for a while. But then once the church gets to a comfortable level again, you have to continue to have those conversations over and over about why we're doing what we do, because reaching people is the most important thing. And so I think it really just comes with conversations and the investment of time with those who you can actually see the emotion and the change of feeling within church members, and when they begin to um, resent the growth, because you're bringing in new people, and like I said, it gets really messy, and then they begin to long for the good old days. And when you see that attitude raise its head, that's just kind of like a signal to you that you need to invest more time trying to help people see that what you're doing is important enough to be uncomfortable for a little while.
Hmm. Yeah, that's great. If you had the opportunity to sit down with one of our listeners, or two of our listeners, or 10 of our listeners that are hearing your words, hearing your stories, your expertise and your advice, and they're saying, okay, I am ready to take some of the steps necessary to begin to initiate impactful change in my community, in my congregation. What would you say to them are the qualities and mindset that they need to have as they prepare to lead change effectively?
I think understanding, as I said, how difficult change is for people, and people in a desperate situation will uh, allow a certain amount of change. But if you're going to do that, then the investment is for the long haul, because while desperation is an emotion that people will have at a certain period of time, at some point, because we are all human beings, nostalgia will begin to raise its head too. And that's another, very, as I said, very powerful emotion. It moves people to really doggedly fight for their opinions. And because we are individuals with different opinions and different worldviews and different histories, being able to have those conversations is of primary importance, because you're going to have to work through these things. You're going to have to understand each other, and it's a give and take process. It's kind of like when I do marriage counseling with people. When they come to me and they say, hey, we want to get married, and I say, okay, let me teach you a word that you're going to have to embrace, and that is compromise. We have to compromise. You're not going to get everything you want, and you're going to have to give up some things. If you want a successful relationship with people, with your church, with your church leaders, then you're going to have to learn to compromise. And so there are plenty of areas where we can reach consensus and we can compromise. But then there are other areas where, if it comes to matters of theology, where those are essential and we have to be in agreement about those. But it all comes from a lot of conversations, really.
That's great. Robert, as we're closing up our time, any last words that you would want to say to our listeners on church leadership, anything that maybe we didn't address that's completely off topic of where we were going today that you would love to say to a small church pastor out there listening that's wanting desperately to see an impact in their community and in their lives?
I would say that it's worth it. That even with I've had some successes and I've had some setbacks, and I've been hurt by people, but it's still worth it. I mean, after all, we're in the life change business, and it's worth it. Like I said, Paul, he was willing to be uncomfortable, and if you want to really see people reach for Christ, then you have to be willing to be uncomfortable. And I know that that's a sacrifice, and that's not going to make everybody go, oh yeah, I want to sign up for that. But when you realize the impact that you're having, it is so worth it. And if you can introduce somebody or reintroduce somebody to Christ because they've had a bad experience with church in the past, and you can create in them this idea that it's not always going to be that way, that is so hopeful and so life-changing, and it's so worth it to invest your life. And I can't think of anything else I'd rather do.
Well, Robert, thank you so much for your time. And I think those closing comments were very well spoken and very well said, and even more importantly, very true. We want to thank you all for listening to the Small Church Podcast this week. Next week, we will have our co-host, Bruce Montgomery, back from vacation with his family in Florida. And so we look forward to hearing back from him. Again, just want to express sincerest thanks to Pastor Robert Bess for hanging out with us for a little while here today, sharing some great insights with us on what it means to lead through change. If you would like more information on how you can lead your church through change, visit higherministries.com. Reach out to us on any social media platforms. Find us on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. And be sure to subscribe to the Small Church Podcast on any of the platforms that you listen to. And we look forward to hearing from you and talking to you again next week. Thanks again. Have a great week.